Welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Ellis, and today I'm back with my first opposition view of the season. It's Tottenham Hotspur versus Everton, and I'm joined by Jack from the Irish Hotspur. How are you doing, Jack?
Doing all right. Looking forward to playing Everton, where we can actually, hopefully grab a win this time around. Spurs should be motivated to try to, I think make do or, make up for what was a good first half, but then bad end to the second half against Leicester City. I expect that you guys will play slightly similar to them, but one thing I will add is that I'm kind of a soft spot for Sean Dyche. So I wonder how this will go. I think he could cause us some problems, and I'm curious what he might have up his sleeve.
Well, I was observing the Tottenham game and observing the Everton reaction on Twitter, and in that first half, it was panic stations all around from Everton fans thinking, "Oh, what are we going to have to deal with in this game?" And then suddenly you end up drawing and nearly even losing the game. So, what do you make as a Tottenham fan of that first game, and has it affected how you're thinking ahead of the season as a whole?
Think in the game in general first and then onto the season, it's one of those whereas sort of content creators or, when we were trying to give instant reactions to a game, it's really head scratching because you have to look at how well you played in the first half, but then you're sort of head scratching as to how you got sort of so lost in the second, how you just didn't go on and end up winning the thing and end up sort of punishing the team and right rewarding yourself for all that great play. And Spurs have done that, a lot of last season and kind of, sadly in the first game of this season where we do look really pleasing on the eye. I think the average neutral is looking at us and thinking, yeah, they're going to go on and win this 2-3-0. But it's never been the case for us. We just don't seem to really be able to, step on people's throat, I guess is the expression, or really be able to put away the majority of our chances. And it kind of then just leaves teams, I think, that we're playing against sort of in hope that, if we get a transition, if we get a set piece, if we get an opportunity, we can actually get back into this one despite, being outplayed, despite being dominated. And it's been kind of a head scratching one with Spurs because it's hard where I think you would rather just kind of see your team in a sense sometimes just play poorly for 90 minutes because then it's an easy explanation. But in our case, I don't think that's the case. We just create so many chances, but we don't end up finishing them. And then you kind of start kind of pointing fingers everywhere to the mentality, to the leadership, to, the forwards, to also the manager, right? And that's what's been hard is kind of a lot of the problems that came up both last season and kind of have shown up again this season. And some of those things I've just mentioned there. But going on into the season, it was only the first game. You'd like to think that we'll learn our lesson this time around. And Ange Postecoglou is well aware of these sort of problems. And hopefully we can grab our first 3 points of the season against you guys. And we don't have to see such a wastefulness from our team in general, because that's kind of been the big theme.
Suppose that's a problem with teams that play such open, expansive football is like you'll get a lot of chances, but you probably miss a lot as well. And it's even more frustrating, like you say, when you play so well in a game and you don't end up getting the 3 points. And it's a big season for Postecoglou, isn't it? He's had his first season now, done well overall, really an incredible start, which tailed off a bit. But now it's time to really step up, isn't it? And he said that he wins trophies in the second season. So maybe, just maybe, he'll do that at Tottenham, which would be obviously huge for your fans that having waited so long without a trophy, just like us Evertonians. So, how are you feeling with Ange Postecoglou ahead of this season? Are you worried about his kind of stubbornness, perhaps, or are you pleased about how you've got a manager who wants to play nice football?
To be honest, I'm kind of one of those Spurs fans that weirdly isn't as always in love with the progressive, expansive type of football. I'm actually, a bit more conservative. I don't mind winning a game 2-0, 1-0, as long as it feels like it's in control, as long as it feels like you are kind of neutralizing your opposition with good defensive play. It's just that in the case of Ange, I think this is what Spurs did ask for, and this is what Spurs in general needed. We had Jose Mourinho, we had Antonio Conte. We tried, to win that sort of way. We tried to get the fast track, sort of fast drive through to trophies with those guys playing a sort of an ugly brand of football. And it just didn't work out for us for a variety of reasons, both for their own fault, the managers, but also I think in the case of kind of the ownership and the lack of backing, I think in either not giving them the signings they needed. In the case of Jose Mourinho, he's one step away from, winning a trophy and we sacked him before it. And it's always been kind of a tough one with Spurs fans where we had a bit of a sour taste in our mouth, I think, when it comes to Jose Mourinho or Antonio Conte. Most Spurs fans do kind of just spit out, something, whenever they hear those two names. And I kind of had a more of a soft spot for those guys because I felt like they were capable of delivering us trophies. And Ange has come in and has kind of showed us once again, what Spurs in the past have always played like. We've always technically identified with a more expansive on the front foot style of football. And I think even a lot of Spurs fans that are much, much older than me, and of course, maybe not Yanks like myself, where they would say, kind of like, even if we were technically outmatched or even if we were, on paper, not the better team, they did like that Spurs, at least historically, would kind of just try their best and trying to, provide positive, entertaining brand of football and wouldn't really cower to the opposition no matter how much better they were than us. And I think, Ange Postecoglou has kind of given that sort of sense of feeling back to us where we look strong, we look like, we can create chances, we look like we can give anybody a game, even if we are out of form, even if we are maybe technically outmatched. But I think he's given that sort of sense of nostalgia really to a lot of Spurs fans that might have, really identified with the time when we had Harry Redknapp to the days of, when it was Glenn Hoddle, Ozzy Ardiles, Mickey Hazard in midfield, those sort of kind of, eras of when Spurs were playing, brilliant football and all the way back to, the Birkinshaw days and the Bill Nicholson days where Spurs were kind of known for being that team that always played an expansive brand of football. And to a degree, I think Ange has more or less delivered that. And in his first season, he did unite the fan base because the fan base was very toxic. It's very split after the Jose and the Antonio Conte days. I think that's pretty typical with those two managers. They do tend to, kind of split the fan base once they leave. And Ange Postecoglou, at least in my opinion, has repaired a lot of the fan base. But now going into this season, as you mentioned, he has said he wants to win trophies. And I'm not too sure, once again, in very Spurs fashion, very Daniel Levy fashion, I'm not too sure if he's really been fully backed to go on and deliver those trophies this season. I'm hopeful we can go deep into Europe, hopeful we can go deep into a domestic cup or two. But when it comes to the Premier League, I'm not that confident that we're going to finish as high as maybe Ange Postecoglou would have liked to going into this season because we've only signed very, very young players and guys with not as much experience as you would like. And I'm not even too sure if we've totally solved that kind of attacking problem where kind of similar to you guys last season, it felt like we waste a lot of chances and we needed somebody that can help out Sonny, help out a Richarlison, help out a Solanke, and have someone on that right wing. I'm not sure we've done that either. So I think in true Spurs fashions, I'm probably complaining a bit too much, but it's just Ange Postecoglou's been a bit of a mixed bag going into the second season.
It's so important, isn't it, that a manager delivers a style that does fit the culture of the club. I think Tottenham have historically played that expansive brand of football, and it just helps get the fans on side. If you're playing the right way, you can be forgiven for results at times. Whereas if you're not playing the right way, as we know, you're instantly under more scrutiny. Sean Dyche plays a style that splits the fan base, just like those two managers that you mentioned. And it isn't easy on the eye, but last season it got us points, it got us results. So it's one of them where Everton fans are torn on him at the moment as well. And going into this game, we've just been thumped by Brighton. The mood is not good. It was a real bad reaction to that game. The ground emptied quite a lot from the end of that game. It was a tough sight to see, really, being there on the 99th minute. And Brighton just dismantled us after quite a bright start from us, really. So we'll be going into this game thinking we cannot get battered again because
Yeah.
your confidence is already shot. It'd be on the floor if we got battered again. So Everton will be going into this hoping, can we just stay tight, stay solid, and somehow just nick a point, I imagine. But what are you thinking of Everton for this game in particular, and then for the season as a whole? Obviously, we've got a lot of injuries at the moment. I mentioned on your show that we've got a very much makeshift back four, but what are you thinking of Everton? I know you like Sean Dyche, so
Yeah, I do. I have a soft spot for him for his time at Burnley, just because I did think he punched well above his weight and delivered in fact European football for them, which I just still think is one of the most, underrated achievements that he was able to do for a club like Burnley, especially with the players that he did have. And he kind of gives that sort of sense of, I'm not sure if that's the case with you guys right now, but he did deliver that sense of team where it wasn't kind of a team of individuals. It was like a real cohesive unit that did kind of move for each other and fight for each other. And that's what I did like about his principles. And he does seem to have a trick up his sleeve every game or two where he has, something that he's pointed out or something that he might have seen and kind of that the opposition does that he can take advantage of, whether it's those kind of infamous long diagonals, to over the fullback's head, which I could expect him to do against us because we tend to expose our fullbacks with the way that we try to play, or it's from set pieces, or it's from something else that he might pick out kind of every other game or two against a team like ours that is pretty much the opposite style of how he likes to play. And I think it always creates then an interesting matchup where sometimes he gets it right, sometimes he doesn't get it right. I do expect that Spurs should be able to win this one because Ashley Young picking up a red card to, the makeshift back four, like you mentioned, with Michael Keane still being there, someone who scored an amazing goal, I remember a few years ago against us, but someone who I don't necessarily rate. I'm not too sure if this is a harsh one to say, but I kind of feel like he's a bit of like the Eric Dyer that we had in our team, where someone who maybe has a good game or two, but also has some real howlers as well, in kind of the defense. And so I hope that Spurs can take advantage of a mistake or two from him. And then also hearing that Tarkovsky couldn't be available is, I think, a big help for us because he's someone who I really rate from set pieces. And Spurs have been really poor at defending those. At least that was the case last season. And to be honest, I feel like Tarkovsky is kind of like Van Dijk or, kind of other players in the Premier League where they do just seem to win every header in the set piece situations. And that's something that I would really worry about. And if he's not available, at least I hope he is, and that would be a big help to us. And I think that, Everton could cause us some problems in those sort of areas. It's just that with Spurs, we are desperate to get 3 points here. So I do kind of expect that, we should be able to get over the line. And, in the case of Everton in general, I hope that Sean Dyche can, be able to deliver for you guys a fine season because, I think he is a good manager. And I felt like I was a little bit confused by, I listen to Talk Sport over here in the USA whenever I can, because sometimes my only glimpse of maybe how some fans are feeling. Of course, it's not really a good representation of, a fan base, but a lot of fans are already calling for Dyche out, and we're saying that, this just isn't sustainable. They're saying they wanted everybody from, David Moyes back to Lampard back, that type of thing. And I thought that was a bit harsh on Dyche because, had it not been for, the 9 points deducted from you guys, would never have any worries about, finishing near the relegation zone. And you still picked up some really impressive results last season that weren't flukes, in my opinion, were definitely by design and definitely, very clever tactics again from Dyche. It's never pretty, but they are clever, in my opinion. And I just feel like he sometimes gets a hard rap. And I was a little bit surprised to hear that, Everton fans already are happy to be done with him. But of course, that's not a representation of maybe how you feel or how the rest of the fan base feel.
Yeah, I think the fans are quite torn on him, really. A lot of fans will appreciate the work that he has done, keeping us in the league through such like turbulent times, I suppose. And he has done well in that sense. He's got a year left on his contract now. His contract is up in summer, so there's a massive decision to be made by the potential new owners as to whether you keep him on or not. He seems to be the right guy at the moment just to steer us into that new stadium, but like you say, it certainly is not pretty. And the start's bad, but I just hope that we can move on from that and have a bit more of a steady start to the season because you don't want to lose 3-0 at home on the first day. But there was a few caveats to it. We did have injuries. The new signings weren't played, which a lot of Everton fans were disappointed about. The likes of Iliman Ndiaye, Jesper Lindstrom, Jake O'Brien, none of them were played. And it left a lot of us scratching our heads, really, because Dyche seems to think that a player has to go through maybe the first 4 or 5 games without playing just to finally be dropped in. And that that caused a lot of disagreement within the fan base. But looking at this game, I think it's going to be a makeshift team as a whole. So we will be hoping just to get through it unscathed, really. But for you guys, I suppose it's an absolute must win for you now. And it's suddenly a point where Everton fans need a reaction and you guys need a reaction. So what are you thinking in terms of how Tottenham will set up? What players should we be particularly worried about in your side? Who's going to start, do you think?
That's kind of funny, right? You could expect that it get toxic for either fan base, whichever team ends up going 1-0 up. Either you guys end up, being really upset, or in our case, we end up being super upset. In the case of us, I do feel like, we should be able to set up with Sonny up top, Solanke through the middle, and then also on the right, it should be able to be someone like, hopefully not Brendan Johnson. Hopefully it is Wilson Odebear, because Brendan Johnson for us has been very frustrating player, and he's not really been able to either create chances for us on a consistent basis or be able to finish any of his chances. And it hopefully can be somebody that, can do one of those two things. We're not even very much asking for anything on that right side. And I think it is going to sadly be probably Brendan Johnson once again. It's someone that Ange Postecoglou has been very faithful towards for some reason or another, as well as James Maddison, who has struggled at times in the Spurs team. He has been very kind of inconsistent, you could say. And I think James Maddison is probably less of a kind of, frustrating, kind of player than Brendan Johnson is. I think with James Maddison, we know he's a good player. But with Brendan Johnson, we're still kind of scratching our head whether he is one or not, and whether he really was worth that 47 million pounds, whatever we ended up paying him for. And yeah, I think with Spurs, it should be, a front three of Solanke, Sonny, and then hopefully someone different on the right. And if it is someone different on the right, then I expect that, it should be, better performance from ourselves. And Solanke is a funny one where you mentioned to me that he seems to, kind of want to score against Everton, being a former Liverpool player, and just had, kind of a good game against you guys during his time at Bournemouth as well. I wonder if he is going to be extra motivated, alongside the Spurs team to be able to score in this one because he had chances. His hold up play was very good. It's just that he wasn't really, finishing those chances. And he did look like a guy that, is coming to a big club and is under pressure for the most part. And I wonder if he'll be extra motivated and hopefully focused enough to be able to put away one of those chances because he probably could have scored two or three, I think, against Leicester City, but he didn't. And with a club like Spurs compared to a club like Bournemouth, can't necessarily get away with that for too long. They will start to throw pressure on you. Even a guy like Richarlison, has been put under pressure for missing chances in the past for Spurs. So hopefully that front three could change, and then we could probably go on and win this one.
Is there any chance that our old friend Richarlison could feature in this game?
He did end up featuring towards the end of that game against Leicester City, but he kind of in Richarlison fashion, sadly, which is sometimes maybe a sad story instead of always, maybe, a happy story. He missed a pretty good chance towards the end. Like it was a clean header. He pretty much rose above, his marker and found the right space and was able to, find kind of this area kind of in the near post. And he just really cued it and got a lot of power behind it in true Richarlison fashion, but ended up really getting it off target. And so I hope that he can feature. I'm a big Richarlison fan. It's kind of a divisive player at Spurs. I think a lot of people necessarily don't like Richarlison who are Spurs fans, but I happen to be one of them that does. And I hope that he does feature. Maybe he could even feature on the wings. I know that you mentioned to me in the preview that he's done well before in the past on the wings. I think he can do a job out there. I think he is better as a striker, but his work rate and also just that sort of like unorthodox style of play that he can have where he sort of does have a bit of trickery in his game. It looks a bit clumsy, but he does know how to take it past his man, or he can, find a pass, like between a player's legs when you don't expect it, and that sort of thing with Richie. And I hope that he could play on the right. If it isn't going to be someone like Odebear, maybe it could be, Sonny on the right, Richie on the left, or Richie on the right, Sonny on the left with Solanke up top. But I really doubt that's going to be the case. I expect him to sadly come off the bench and probably relieve Solanke if we're maybe one goal, two goals up, or in case Solanke once again doesn't deliver and Ange Postecoglou needs something different.
Interesting. He's such a unique player, Richarlison, and we all absolutely love him at Everton. And I hope he isn't too involved in this game. But time for your prediction now. I want to hear your thoughts on what final thoughts on this game and then your prediction.
Final thoughts are Spurs kind of have to win this one, so I'm going to say that they will. I am a little nervous because, as I said, I rate Dyche and I think he has a trick up his sleeve, and I wonder if there will be a set piece or two that you guys end up scoring and could, make the fan base very nervous, could make the stadium pretty toxic. And once that's the case, we have seen our players kind of cower in those situations. That was the case against Leicester City. The moment that they scored, despite us being on top of them and despite us being very much in control, we lost our heads and we pretty much started handing the game over to them. They actually could have gone on and won it. And I'm worried that something similar could happen with Spurs if we only are one goal up and, then you guys end up grabbing an equalizer and we sort of again lose our heads and, continue to, not play the same way and, start to hand the game to you guys. But, in this situation, it's just 3 points is a must for us. I think it's the case for you guys, but the fact that we're playing at home, Ange Postecoglou already maybe under a little bit of pressure from the fan base. I think they just have to deliver here. So I'm going to say 3 points is a must, and I'm going to go for like I said to you, maybe a 2-1. I wish it was a 3-1 or a 4-1, but I think it's only going to be a 2-1 because I'm worried about our ability to finish chances. And again, I expect you guys to score at least from a set piece or something kind of very Sean Dyche-esque.
I'm going to go for 1-1, and it's going to have to be a miracle from our makeshift defence to do this. But I don't want to be negative on our own channel talking about Everton. I'm going to back us to get our first point of the season, get a draw, and that would then just about alleviate some of the fears that we had against Brighton. So that would make everyone feel a little bit better. But before we let you go, mate, Are you all right to do some quick fire questions and then a random question at the end?
Absolutely.
Right, here we go then. First of all, where are Everton going to finish?
I'm going to say 14th this season. I think you guys are going to be well clear of relegation, but sadly, it's going to be like a Crystal Palace season, I think, for you guys, or a Fulham season, where eventually it's, going to start going into randomness and you guys will kind of stop caring.
We'll probably take that. Just about. Where are Tottenham going to finish this season?
I had us down for fourth. I'm going to stick with that for now because I was a little bit emotional after the first game, but I'm not going to lose my head here. I'm going to still stick with that fourth position.
Who wins the league?
Everyone's worried about Arsenal, as am I. I'm just going to say it's going to be Man City just because it has to be. I'm one of those Spurs fans who would rather not see Arsenal win the league in pretty much any situation if we can avoid it.
Interesting. Who goes down?
Sadly, I think it could be all three teams, where Forest somehow stay alive, but it will be Ipswich Town, it will be Leicester City, and it will be Southampton. I think it's become that sort of sad state of the Premier League where it seems like it's a very insurmountable task to be a promoted team and come back up again and
Well,
uh and stay in the Premier League.
you mentioned the sad state of the Premier League. That leads me very nicely on into the random question. What is your biggest pet peeve in football? I'm sure there's a few.
Yeah, there probably is a few. Maybe that just quickly on that one. Yeah, that is kind of a sad situation with the Premier League where it has become, in my opinion, this probably is my pet peeve, where, it has become a bit of a super league where, the fact that even there was that want of, it wasn't the fans want, but a lot of the owners wants and, outside foreign interest, I think especially USA interest to try to create some type of European super league. When in fact, I think the Premier League has already become a super league where you have what was it, Forest, bringing in Keylor Navas, on loan from PSG for like, a season just to stay up. I found that to be one of the most ridiculous transfers I've ever seen. You have Vincent Kompany, coming up from Burnley, spending over £100 million on a squad to still go straight back down afterwards. So that probably is maybe my pet peeve where some people like to think that, there's this need for, maybe a super league of some kind. Again, it's not, really the mostly the fans, but I do feel like the Premier League has become almost a bit too, yeah, Super League-y, where, we're outspending every other European league by 10 times, 4 times, 5 times what their, expenditure is. You have clubs like, in the case of Spurs, spending as much as like a Bayern Munich would, and things like that. And it's become all a bit ridiculous. So I would say that's definitely a big pet peeve at this point.
It would be a worrying time if the same teams go down from who got promoted again. If that starts happening repeatedly, it just widens the gap, doesn't it? And then obviously teams go down there and they get the parachute payments. And I know a lot of championship fans would also argue that it's probably is that they don't agree with that as well, because then it gives the teams that go down the chance to come straight back up. So it is a bit flawed at the moment, and hopefully it'll resolve itself soon. But thank you very much for coming on, Jack.
No, thank you, Ellis. It's been a pleasure and appreciate you doing that on our channel as well.
No worries at all. So go and check out the Irish Hotspur. The link will be in the description. Go and check out their videos. We see their reaction from the game. Hopefully, it's a bit of a glum reaction after Everton have nicked something from Tottenham. But that is all from the opposition view today. We do hope you've enjoyed. We're back for the new season, ready for hopefully a good season for Everton. But that is all now. See you later.